of General Director of the National Trust for the Development of Tourism for Natur, where he was part of the expanded cabinet of the Mexican presidency. Finally, but not least important, public enterprise foreign.
Thank you, Anders. Since we're running a little bit behind schedule, I'd like to start right away without further ado. Mr. Long, if you could please open up with your statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure for me to join a very important conference. I did with Ms. Francis. And I believe that the conference is so important, especially the kind of subject we're discussing. As you know, China has used as very important poverty reduction in the past 30 years. But in recent years, it seems to me that some people from corners understand that it is all, of course, to gradually turn China into a so-called export-led growth pattern, domestic consumption growth pattern. Yes. It takes time, because to create a kind of so-called domestic consumption economic growth pattern, you need to increase the income of your people. You have to have your people sufficient money to consume. This is simple economic common sense. You need to continue to increase the income of people, especially people in the countryside. Because for all developing countries, including China, most of the people are still in the countryside. So when we are talking about poverty reduction or the increased income of the people, first and foremost, we're talking about poverty reduction in the rural areas. And as far as China's experience is concerned, for the poverty reduction in the rural areas, the most important means is urbanization. No matter how much subsidies you give to the farmers, no matter how many preferential policies you provide to the rural areas, no matter how much external assistance can be reached and provided to the rural areas, it can hardly work fundamentally. The fundamental way for the poverty reduction in the rural areas is the urbanization. That is, you have to move most of the people from the rural areas to the cities. This is the way that China has been doing in the past 30 years. In the past 30 years, China has already moved about 200 million farmers from the rural areas to the big cities, or to the cities and the towns. And this is the most fundamental way for poverty alleviation. We have to continue that process. So the Chinese government has determined that we are going to continue the process of urbanization, and every year we have to move at least 10 million farmers from the rural areas and make them the city resident. This is very important because in many ways, there's a strong incentives for the rural people to move into the cities. First, the people now are seeing increasing income difference between the urban people and the rural people. They have seen tremendous difference between the life quality in the urban areas and the rural areas. And in these information areas, this kind of information spread very fast. The rural areas are no longer the so-called isolated areas. The rural young people, they are eager to move to the cities. And there are so many opportunities in the cities. So there are strong incentives for the rural people to move to the cities. And for the government, if we want to really create a kind of so-called domestic consumption-based economy, we have to see that there are more and more consuming population in the cities. So by moving 10 million farmers from the rural areas to the cities, actually we are creating 10 million more city consumers, which is the biggest driving forces for China's continuous economic growth. So we are talking about China's economic growth will continue for another 20 years at a kind of rate at least 8%, because we are moving 10 million people from rural areas and we are having 10 million new consumer populations in the cities. Because by average, one city residents, the consuming power is 5 times of that of the farmers. Because once they move from the countryside to the cities, they need infrastructure, you need housing, you need education service, you need medical services. So if we really have to create a kind of consumer or domestic consumption-based economic growth pattern, we have to continue this kind of process of urbanization, no matter how difficult it is. However, in order to keep this kind of urbanization process going on, we have to create jobs for them in the cities. We have to build up infrastructure for them in the cities. But the first and foremost, creating jobs. How we can create jobs? We should mobilize the kind of entrepreneurship of those people from the rural areas to the cities. So they can start a small business. It can be a very effective working force in the factories. This is very important. But another important thing, which is the subject we are discussing, we have to always depend on export. When China just started its opening process in the late 70s, the Chinese people were very poor. We did not have too much to consume by ourselves. We had to rely heavily on foreign market, the external market. So we had to rely heavily on our export. But gradually, the situation is being changed. But until now, China is still a developing country. We still have 500 million people in the rural areas. The urbanization process is still going on. Every year we have to create about 10 million new jobs. So we still have to rely on, to a large extent, on export. This is something we can tell to the world.